Prepare your brains! So in the spring, I read a lot of Fry Festival authors. So all my books this time are all Canadian authors. My first book is Lullabies for Little Criminals by Heather O'Neill. We follow a little girl called Baby. She lives alone with her father, who has a pretty severe addiction to drugs. And we see her living with him, without him, in a pretty intense living situations at times in not the best parts of Montreal. Throughout the book, we see her becoming more of an adult, but she's pushed into adulthood. It's not because she wants to necessarily, although a part of her does want to be more like her dad and more adult, but she's kind of forced into growing up way quicker than she should have. The book is super interesting, and I'm always a sucker for first-person narratives, especially when it's from a source like a child, because they have an interesting perspective that makes you kind of question what it was really like, and if it's just like her way of seeing it. So that's really fun. It is pretty dark at times. This child goes through a lot, but because we see it through her perspective, it's kind of like a clouded version of how dark things were actually during that time. I actually met the author and she was really interesting too. So it's a really interesting read and I do recommend it. My second book is If I Fall, If I Die by Michael Christie. In this book we actually also follow a little child. In this case it's a little boy. And he lives alone with his mother this time. Common theme, that's weird. Basically, they live a super sheltered life because his mother is really afraid of everything. So he's not allowed to leave the house. But not in a super controlling way, just in a that's not his universe kind of thing. Like he doesn't even think about going outside. If you've seen Room, it's kind of like that, where his entire universe is their house. What's really interesting about this book is he does venture outside and meet other people, and his mother's reaction is really not what you would expect. You would expect terror and to keep him inside as much as possible, but she's actually quite open to him exploring and learning new things. She's just terrified that he'll get hurt. This little boy has a really hard time to connect to other children because he hasn't had the same experiences at all. And he starts to skateboard, which is a pretty dramatic thing to do if you've never even been outside. Which is kind of fun too, because the author of this book was a professional skateboarder, so that's a fun fact. So he kind of develops through learning how to skateboard, getting new friends, and he kind of becomes his own person, which is really fun. It's a fun read, it's not too heavy, but it still deals with pretty serious issues at times, so I think it's really interesting, and I do recommend it. Another great Canadian book. My next book is Secret Loves of Geek Girls, and it was edited by Hope Nicholson. So this book is filled with comics and with short essays. So a bunch of people have contributed to this book, including Margaret Atwood, so that's pretty cool. What's fun about this book is it deals with what it's like to be a geek girl in kind of a romantic world. So how is it to date, online date? How is it to have crushes on fictional characters? This book tackles so many different subjects because they're all kind of like short excerpts into someone's life. Either you'll relate to it or you'll know someone who can definitely relate to it. Some of these stories reminded me completely of people I actually know. Throughout the book we get different glimpses into what it's like to experience love, sex, romance, depending on your gender, your sexual orientation, if you were a child of the 80s, for example. Basically, we get a good overall picture of how it is to be a girl and have to deal with love. I really recommend it if you're at all interested in comics. She's a really fascinating person. If you want to know more about her, actually, one of my friends does a podcast, Lonely Hearts Podcast, and she was in one of the episodes. So if you're interested in listening, link down below. So my last book is The Horrors, an A to Z of funny thoughts on awful things by Charles Demers. And this book is awesome. Basically what you get is you go through the entire alphabet, and for each letter of the alphabet he wrote a short essay related to something that's either personal to him or more general, but in general it sucks. But how to have like a positive or funny spin on those things. So he goes through a bunch of different things, like he's super allergic to a bunch of things, so there's a part on that. There's a part on imperialism. It kind of flip-flops all throughout a bunch of different subjects, some more personal and touching, but some more silly. It's really funny, you will laugh, it's super entertaining, and I really recommend it because it's just like a really fun read, and because the essays are super short, you can get through them really quickly, so you kind of want to keep reading it. Great guy, super nice too, and a super interesting book. So those are the books I've read recently. And as a sneak peek, lately it was my birthday. I'm 25. And I got a few books that I will probably include in the next one. So if you're interested in seeing what I will be reading soon, the first one is Straight James, Gay James, which is a book of poetry written by James Franco, and I'm pretty pumped about it. And the second book is Russian Olive to Red King by Imanin? Unclear. And it's a graphic novel, and there is a lily in it. So far that's all I know about it, but it comes highly recommended, so I'm really excited about it. So, what have you guys been reading lately? Leave a comment down below, I'd love to know. If you want to check out our last video, click here! Woo! Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching!